IVM.
Hi everybody, just wanted to ask everyone for a quick favor. We're running a brand survey right now and would really appreciate it if you could let us know what you think about the advertising on IVM. Go to ivmpodcast.com/survey and do let us know. As part of this, we'll be selecting 10 random participants and sending them some IVM swag, so do fill out those surveys.
Hello and welcome to the Habit Coach podcast. I am Ashdin Doctor, your habit coach, and today we're going to be discussing a very important topic these days, which is about mental health. You know, there is so much that we hear on social media, especially in this last couple of years. There's so much talk about, mental health and making mental health a priority for us. In fact, just recently in the Olympics, again, we heard about mental health when Simone Biles decided to not take part. So there's so much of talk around mental health. And I think it's one of those discussions that we need to keep having to make us understand aspects of mental health that are very, very important with us. And for that, I have a guest called Daniel Lobo, and we're going to be discussing this idea of mental health and his journey through this and what fantastic things he's doing in this space. So Daniel, welcome to the Habit Coach podcast.
Thank you so much, Ashdin. It's such a pleasure to be here. And I really appreciate the space that you're creating for these conversations. It's really important in this day and age.
Absolutely. The more we talk about aspects like this, it makes a big difference, especially for the listeners. And you start picking up and becoming more sensitive to these facts. So Daniel, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I'm a dad, I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm a traveler. That's how I kind of like to describe myself. So
lovely.
I've got a 2-year-old toddler. She's the center of my world. I'm a very hands-on dad. So, it's been a transformational journey, being a dad.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an entrepreneur. I've started something called BecauseYOU. It's a social enterprise. It's a mission-driven business that I'll tell you a little bit more about. But it's centered on mental health and how we can really create a holistic approach to mental health. And it started because of my own journey with mental health issues. And it's been a fantastic ride. We've launched in September of last year. So it's been literally 10, 11 months. It's completely morphed from the moment the idea hit me last year. And I'm just enjoying the ride, in some ways. And I think I'm a traveler in many ways. I love traveling. I had a job which took me to different parts of the world, got me to really go under the skin of a city, meet lots of different people. So I feel that's a big part of my identity and my love for the world. I feel it's changed me in many ways. But I also, now I know I'm a traveler of life in many ways. Right? I think I'm someone on the spiritual path. I'm someone who's trying to figure out lots of different things. And I just feel I'm a traveler. So that's what I kind of like to say, that I'm a traveler as well.
I love it. Like the way that you said, traveling, experiencing all these things. And like you were saying about your venture, which is in the space of mental health. And right before when we started this discussion, you were telling me about, I'm so happy that we're having these discusussions, right? What are the conversations that you wish people had around mental health? Like, what are things that you wish people knew?
That's a really good question. So, I think there are lots of things that we can and should be talking about. I think especially over the last 2 years, it's amazing to see that we are suddenly talking about mental health, right? It's not like it's just come up over the last 2 years. Our mental health has always needed attention for a very, very long time. But because of lockdown, because of the fact that we are now in this unprecedented situation, a lot of people are okay talking about it. You've seen online therapy sort of boom, especially in India. And there's lots of good conversation around it. So I'm really happy that, we've come to a space where I can have this conversation with you very openly, right? And at the same time, there's still so much to be done, right? So one is, I think as a society, as a cultural thing, we as Indians sometimes are still reticent to talk about the stuff and the challenges that we go through as human beings. So there's a whole conversation around what is it that I am going through at the moment, and almost normalizing that, right? It's not like the brain is the most complex organ of our body. Obviously something will go wrong, And it's so I think there's one conversation around normalizing mental health conversations. I think there's another one which I really wish that we have, which is how do we go beyond the the biomedical approach to mental health, right? Which is there's something wrong with you, you need to fix it. Here's medicine, here's a doctor, fix it. Let's just do it. It's not that simple, unfortunately, right? So I really believe in this holistic approach, which is mental health is a combination of a lot of different things, and we just need to focus on it in some different ways. Yeah, I think those are two things that I'm really passionate about at the moment.
So the first part, which is that, people tiptoe around the subject.
Yeah.
Right? People don't necessarily have deep, meaningful conversations around it. People necessarily don't know how to address it.
Yeah.
Right? What are things that you wish people knew on this? Like how people should address it? Like how should people normalize it?
Yeah. So firstly, just to preface that by saying anyone who's going through a mental health issue, it's an extremely complex and complicated and confusing time, right? So by me saying that we should normalize it does not mean that everyone needs to talk about their deepest, darkest secrets to everyone. I think that's totally fine to be okay with, sharing what you're comfortable sharing. But I think there are lots of myths to people like me who deal with a mental health issue, right? So I have a fairly serious mental health issue called bipolar disorder. And the thing that you probably hear immediately when you say that to someone is, you might get a thing of, is this person able to, function normally, right? Because the thing you have around mental health issues is maybe, we're influenced by what we see in Bollywood or in movies or what we've read as children, whatever it is. So I think the first thing that we need to really understand that is that it's really complex, the subject. There are lots of us who are dealing with mental health issues, whether we talk about it or not. And there are people who are high functioning, who are doing their own things, which is very, very, the productivity level very high. And at the same time, there are people where it's very, very challenging, right? So I think just the complexity of the issue needs to be appreciated in some ways. It's not a black and white. There's lots of colors in between. And I think that's something that I think I really wish people knew more about. Like if you had to ask someone in your family or your friends, I'm very certain that someone is going through something, right? It could be anxiety, depression, it could be some layer of mental, it's a spectrum. So we need to know that, a person with anxiety will respond to you in a certain way. There's a certain reason why, people feel lonely in a crowd, right? It's not because of their personality. It could be something that they're dealing with. So it's very complex. The other thing is I think at some level, once you start to have these conversations, you realize that you suddenly start to build a lot of empathy with the other person. You start to understand why is it that someone you've known for 20 years has acted the way they have, probably. And I think when we give people the space to be themselves and talk about difficult stuff, it suddenly unleashes a very different side of that person. When someone with a mental health issue feels safe enough to talk about it with another person, it's transformational. That's kind of the bottom line.
It's very interesting. I like what you said that, so many people around us might be going through this, but they're not just talking about it, so we don't know. There's another aspect to it, saying that so many people around us might be going through this, but they don't realize that they're going through this.
Yeah.
Correct? Because they don't know how or what to describe it as. Yeah. I know that the previous generation, the generation before that, probably did not necessarily have the vocabulary to describe what they were going through or understand what they were going through.
Yeah.
Correct? So now when you look back at my grandparents' behavior and my great-grandparents' behavior and why they did what they did, now you say, oh, maybe this is what they were going through at that point of time, and nobody would have been able to diagnose that.
Yeah.
Correct? Yeah. I think we are very, very fortunate to be living in this day and age where we can understand this. And if we don't, it's sad.
Yeah, it's sad and it's part of the journey, right? I think, yes, our generation is better than the previous. So my dad dealt with bipolar disorder for 40 years, right? He didn't have the amount of information at the tips of his fingertips that I do. He had his own way of dealing with it. I could be, me and maybe a few people around me are people who are able to deal with it in a really good way. But I think we need to appreciate that when something happens, it's extremely, it shifts everything in your life. especially when it's a little serious. So I have a lot of appreciation and empathy for people who also don't know what to do because the system is really complex. So in India, the statistics of care for mental health is really bad, right? So we have 9,000 psychiatrists in the entire country. That's one for every 135,000 people. We're going to take another 75 years of training therapists to get to the level that we need today. So the system around us. So add that, you add the cultural taboo of stuff, and add all the myths that surround it. And even today, it's like I think it's totally normal that people don't know a lot about it, which is why I'm passionate to come on platforms like this and try and maybe demystify a couple of things or share my own experience as just a normal person who's gone through this, and hopefully it might inspire some others to reach out, ask for help, or get to know themselves better.
Beautiful. Tell me, what are the aspects that you wanted to share on understanding mental health?
Yeah, I think there are 3 or 4 things that I'm really passionate about, and we have realized as an organization at BecauseYOU really underpin what we do, right? So let me just talk quickly about BecauseYOU. We are a mission-driven business. We work with individuals and organizations to create a kind of holistic approach to mental health. So our focus really is how can you place mental health care and self-care at the center of your world? Because when you do that, it has a ripple effect on everything that you do in life, right? It's guaranteed. There's no doubt that I have in my mind that it will have an impact on your life. So that's what we do as an organization. We've been around for 11 months. We've got a team of very interesting, eclectic people, multiple approaches who have different expertise. What we have drilled our essence down to is 3 words. One is wholeness. The second is compassion, and the third is connection, right? And I think these are the 3 things that I want to share, just in terms of if you want to look at mental health. These are 3 important things that we need to talk about. So the first is wholeness. The approach to mental health, in our belief, is that if you take care of your mind, if you take care of your body, if you take care of your spirit, it has a massive impact on you as you show up. Right. So what does that mean? Whether we all take care of our body in some way or form. Some of us are better than others. Whether it's physical exercise, whether it's movement, whether it's sleep, whether it's all the things that you do for your physical well-being. Right. The second is your mental well-being, which is how do you kind of switch off? How do you create boundaries? How do you not go into the social media doom sort of scrolling every single day? Like research has proven that if you multitask, you're actually completely unproductive, right? So how do you focus on things in short periods of time? How do you take breaks? All of these really help in sharpening the mental well-being side of our life. The spiritual aspect is whatever moves you, whether it's prayer, whether it's meditation, whether it's something that you believe in a higher power, mysticism, whatever it is. That could be one realm of it. Another realm could simply be that you are connected to the purpose of your life or your work, right? And or your family, like whatever it is. So those are 3 sort of, when we think about mental health, we think about it in that way: mind, body, spirit. And we have lost our connection with our bodies. We've lost connection with our spirit. Because we are in this fast-paced, consumeristic world, and we are trying to bring that connection back in some ways. So that's
Daniel,
one.
so let's talk a little bit about these 3 aspects. Sure. Deep dive into them. So the first one is body, right? Why is the body so important when we talk about mental health? What is the connection? Yeah, because when we talk about holistic, we're saying sab kuch, everything together. So what is the role of body and mind?
Yes, I mean, again, we've known this as a culture for many, many years, which is why yoga is designed the way it is, right? But your body impacts your mind impacts your body. There's a very clear connection between the two. Research over the last few years have shown that any trauma that you face as a child, as a human being, it's stored in your body, right? So, and you will identify that by small signals that your body is starting to give you. So when you start to feel anxious, the first thing that happens is maybe your breath starts to get a little shorter, right? Your shoulders might get a little tight. You might feel like you can't get up or walk, or your mood is a little low. You don't want to get out of bed and go on, right? So your body is giving you these signals. So the minute you start listening to your body and trying to understand, okay, something's up, I need to work with this a little bit, it immediately has an impact on your mental health. So that's, I hope, the answer. I mean, that's the way I would look at it.
So to basically understand what is the relationship between what it is that you're feeling, thinking, and the way that your body is reacting to what you're feeling, thinking.
Yeah.
Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the other way around as well, right? Because sometimes what we do is we think a lot, but we have no attention to what's happening in our body. But if tomorrow your shoulders are tight and you suddenly realize that my shoulders are tight, there's a reason for that, and you go a little bit deeper into that, you realize that your shoulders are tight because you're overthinking about something, you're stressed about work, and so on. So I'm saying there's a reverse sort of relationship which is not looked at a lot. We always look at thinking and then body. I'm talking about body and then leads to thinking.
Absolutely. And there's so many studies that show the correlation between exercise and mental health.
Yeah.
And there are so many, studies that have been done on the way that your mood is boosted after exercise. So, which is why I say just like get out in the sun, do some exercise, and you'll see a dramatic difference in the way that you feel.
Yeah,
I think that is an important aspect of exercise in body.
Huge aspect. Whether it's exercise, whether it's any sort of movement, you getting up between these calls and just jumping and doing a couple of jumping jacks will automatically shift a few chemicals in your brain, right?
And what's the role of food in this? Because food is also part of the body, right? And the way that our body...
Yeah, like the gut is called the second brain of our body. So every time you say, I feel in my gut that something is wrong, it's actually there's something wrong. So there's very clear studies that show that digestion systems, if there's something not well with your digestion system, it immediately impacts your moods, right? And the reverse is also true. When you're not well mentally, it will immediately show in your gut. It'll show in your digestive system. So that's why we talk about clean eating. That's why there's a lot of talk around plant-based diets. It's not a fad. It's something that we've been doing for centuries, which has now become a fad, in the Western world in some ways. But yeah, food is huge as well.
Food is an important aspect of even thinking about mental health. So I think it's an important thing to talk about. Junk food, processed foods, again, have been shown to have a very adverse effect on the way that our mental well-being exists. Yeah, exactly. Brilliant. So that's one aspect, which is the body. Then we were talking about the mind, right?
Yeah.
So what to do for the mind?
$1 million question. What to do for the mind? So I think one of the ways to look at it is it's all energies, right? So we talked about physical energy at the moment. If you think about from the mind, you could almost break that down into mental energy and emotional energy. So mental energy is the quantity of stuff that happens. So if I'm on back-to-back calls, it's impossible for me to even function properly after a certain point, right? So how do you almost take care of that in a certain way? How do you give breaks to yourself? How can you connect with something that is beyond, like yourself, right? So as I'm sitting here, I'm looking out into, lots of greenery. Now that immediately sends, really good energy back to me, right? So how can you take care of your brain in different ways? And emotional is everything from, what in psychology terms you call sort of regulation and correlation and co-regulation, right? So regulation is, if you take an example of, if you're scared or if you're anxious, what happens is you're suddenly thinking about the future or about the past, right? If you think about the present, you're actually fine. You're not too much in danger, but our mammalian brain is sort of going into freeze sort of mode. So one of the things that you do is it's called a grounding principles, right? So that's where meditation, all that comes in. But if one of the most useful things is literally if you put your feet on the ground, right, and just count to 3, or that's one of the ways you get connected back to the earth. You know that you're there, you're here in the present, and your breathing starts to normalize. Right? So that's one way to just come back, and then your brain, your body starts to work in tandem. There are multiple other ways to do sort of grounding techniques and so on. That's, we can talk about that later, but I would say those are big things. Co-regulation is like the reason why we do it in groups, or where you talk to someone and start to feel better. There's lots of research which shows that once you do that and you are listening to me and you are with me in that moment, our nervous systems are syncing up, right? And if your energy is a little bit calm, it will immediately calm me down. That's what is called a co-regulation. So all these factors kind of help with the brain, the mental well-being, that aspect. It's a huge topic. I don't think we have
we have tons of time. Aram se. Which is one last question on this part. Which is your favorite technique to get yourself back if you catch your mind slipping, or you realize that you're getting anxious or something's happening to you?
Yeah, I like to get up and walk. That I think movement is one of the most underrated aspects of mental health. It has massive, even a simple walk, even a walk makes a huge difference to your life, which is why when our doctors say take 30 minutes walk, it's not just for physical energy, but it's also for your mental energy. But if you can't do 30 minutes in between calls, go for a walk, come back, do a few shake-ups, you'll suddenly see your energy completely changing. So I definitely recommend some sort of movement during the day.
Awesome. All right, great. Soul.
The spirit. Yeah, I mean, the spirit is so individual for each person, right? So I believe a lot in energy. Another person might believe in faith or a god or a religion. But in essence, what is it? It's you are in tune with something that you may not understand, but you're with that energy or thing completely. So I have a lot of appreciation for people who pray, who have rituals. Even if you don't understand it, doesn't really matter, because it's giving you a habit in some ways. But it's also connecting you to an energy which may be out of your consciousness, right? So I truly believe there's a spiritual realm to all of us, and that's basically what our life's purpose is to kind of go through the layers. So whatever works for you, right? So some it could be spirituality. For others, people find meaning in work, right? So you and I might be so passionate about our work that is our life's purpose. And that is also spiritual. That is also giving us meaning. It's giving us something more than just, our food, water, and our basic needs. So that's why I say spiritual is really important for us.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. See you on the other side.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On the first episode of Last Brand Standing, learn all about the intriguing battles between Tata Motors and Maruti Suzuki with hosts Anupam and Ambi, hosts of other shows on the IVM Podcast Network, Besa Vesa, and the Sponge Podcast. Great show that I think you'll really enjoy. We would also like to announce our collaboration with Hans, India's most widely read literary magazine. Hans Vani is now available in audio version on IVM Podcast. Do check it out. On Tere Mere Raste, Keshav tells us how people lived underground in Turkey's Kemakli city for generations. Varun introduces us to the world of audio advertising with Stas Tushinsky on Advertising is Dead. How can influencers shift from advertising to paid content? Siddharth Deshmukh tells us on Smarter with Sid. And on the Wire Talk, Siddharth talks to A.D. Singh about how badly restaurants are hit during the lockdown. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any other show for that matter, please do tell a friend. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors on the network this week, Siet, Cred, Bank of Baroda, Quarter, CoinSwitch, Kuber, and Intuit India. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Welcome back. Let's jump into the conversation. The next step you were saying. So the first one was the holistic approach.
The first one is wholeness. Yeah, we call it wholeness or holistic approach. The second one is compassion, which is one of the most difficult things to do for yourself.
What is compassion, firstly?
So compassion is, it could be anything that you want to call it, right? It's if It could be you wanting to achieve something in your life, but suddenly realizing that it's taking too much time. I'm really tough on myself. I'm putting so much pressure on myself as the male member of the family to take care of my thing. How can you be compassionate with this? Or how can you be okay with the fact that it might take a little bit more time? Just being kind to yourself. Forget about compassion. How can you be kind to yourself? And
that itself is a bouncer for many people, right? When you say be kind to yourself, be kind to somebody else, right? Like, and you're like thinking, but how do you be kind to yourself? How do you be
so I'll
kind
give
to
you an
myself?
example, right? So I don't know about you, but I get into these social media doom scroll things pretty much every day, right? So sometimes I end up spending time till 1 o'clock in the night, even though I know that I cannot be doing that. It's not good for my mental health. It still happens, right? And I have a very clear target that for me, I want a good nighttime routine because that's really important for mental health. Now, that does not happen. What happens is, and this is, I'm sure a lot of people identify with this, is you get into lots of guilt. You get into lots of, blaming yourself, like, I can't even do this. You go into this self-pity cycle or self-blaming cycle, like the inner critic comes out a lot. Now, if you're able to be kind to yourself and say, listen, out of 7 days, I'm not able to do this. Maybe this week, I'm just going to try 2 days. The next week, if I do 3 days, that'll be awesome. So I'm just going to be kind to myself. I know that today I've slipped up. I'm going to make up for it next week. But just taking it slow, right? Because this journey is a long journey and being perfect is impossible for us. So I'm saying whenever we feel that we are really hard on ourselves, it's sometimes counterintuitive to say, if you're a little easier, take a little calm, like chill out a little bit, be kind to yourself. We know that this will take a long time. It has a massive impact.
What you said is so important, because the number of people who write in saying that, I don't think I've achieved enough. I'm not doing anything. I'm 23 and I've not done anything in my life. And I don't know what kind of job I want. I don't know what this, I don't know what that. And all these things are self-imposed, right? Nobody is having these expectations for them. They have put these expectations in themselves. There is no compassion. There's no kindness. There is no understanding of patience, like you're saying, that these things take time. So I think understanding which is your language of compassion or kindness is very, very important. So there's this guy called the kindness guy or something like that. I think he has a Netflix show as well, and he defines kindness as just allowing yourself to see somebody, or just being seen by somebody is getting that kindness. Many people are just feel that they're not seen, right? And they pass through the world like shadows, and they pass through themselves like shadows. Many people don't see themselves either. So just the aspect of acknowledging that somebody is there with you is one form of kindness. So smiling at somebody is a form of kindness. And I think that is such a nice way of thinking about it, because it's something simple then, right? At least acknowledging that you exist. Can you acknowledge that you exist to yourself? That is one way of thinking about it. So compassion is a very, very powerful force.
And it's massive, right? Because think about the other way, which is if you're not compassionate with yourself, you're always putting pressure on yourself, right? And this is what happened to me. This is what, like, my identity was work. I had to be the best at everything. Now, the minute you're not compassionate and the minute you slip up, it's just adding and adding and adding. And at a certain time, it's going to blow up. So I learned this very late in life, which is why I try and say this a lot to especially the people who say they're 23 and haven't achieved anything. I say, you got a lot of time in your life. Take it slow, and you got lots to discover about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you just said is so important, that I put it on myself that I have to be the best in everything.
Yeah.
I had a friend's son come to me the other day saying that I have to be the number one ranking person in my college. There is no option.
No other option. Yeah.
There's no option. And I'm like, who's asked you to do this? Your parents have asked you? No. Anyone's asked you? No. Then why are you doing this to yourself? You're like, I don't know any other way.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah. And I think, Ashdin, we have to appreciate that, yes, part of it is us putting the pressure on ourselves. But there are lots of unconscious signals that we give as society as well, right? So, firstly, we are a completely consumeristic society. Secondly, as Indians, whether or not it's conscious or not, we have certain expectations. We grow up with these, even as a male member of society, you have certain expectations of you, right? However liberal you are, it's still there. And I don't think it's an Indian thing, it's just a global thing. It's probably more pronounced in our culture. So I think we have to appreciate that there is a system around which is also putting in the pressure. And now with social media and the FOMO culture and the fact that you have to just be plugged in every single moment, like I have people in the community who have switched off from social media because they say I can't see the happiness of other people and I'm feeling so crappy myself, right? How is that fair in some ways?
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of it's how we are, so we got to deal with it.
It's so important. So when my social media presence was growing, I made a decision and I said that I'm going to keep my social media FOMO free zone. That means that no posts on how cool my life is.
Yeah.
Right? Meaning my life may be super cool, but I'm not going to put it out there. And I felt that was something that was an important decision to be taken. So on my profile, I've written FOMO free zone. That means if you even once say, "Oh, FOMO, tabak," you're going to get a whack from me. So the idea is, how do you start at least making whatever you're doing online a little bit more healthy? I love it. So compassion. The last one is very, very important according to me. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so connection is really important. For us, it's two ways. Again, there's a connection to self, which I think I've already spoken about a lot. I think the foundational element of mental health is the more you're self-aware of what's going on with you, within your body, within your brain, all that kind of stuff, it starts to get a little easier, right? So connection to self is super important. We have an added element of connection to a community, right? So this was really important for me because in my journey of the last 6 years that I've been dealing with a severe mental health issue, it's been an amazing journey, but it's been a lonely journey, right? And I think what really worked in some ways was I had a supportive community of my wife was amazing, my friends, my family. So even though they didn't understand what I was going through, they were there. And I think that really helped me be stable, even when there was lots of external chaos. So for us, when we talk about doing stuff in groups, so all our work is in groups, so, and it's an additive thing. So individual therapy is awesome for people who work. And once you add work in groups, healing in groups, it completely adds a new dimension to your journey. So when you're in a group, it's suddenly, and I've just spoken to a couple of community members today who finished a program with us. One of the things that they said was, I was on this journey where I felt like my problems were huge. And suddenly when I'm in this group of 10 people and I'm listening to the others, it's not everything about me. Suddenly, my issue or my challenge, I can learn so much more about me by listening to someone else. So we talked about co-regulation in the beginning. That happens in groups. This factor of not feeling alone in your journey for someone who's dealing with a mental health issue, number one challenge, right? It's really, really lonely. The minute you go into a group where you suddenly felt like it's a safe space, you can share, but share when you're ready to share. You're learning a few new things to deal with your mental health. And you are in a space where there are others who are on some part of the journey. Doesn't need to be exactly where you are. It suddenly makes it an easier journey to have. So that's why we say connection is really important, and we try as much as possible to do that in the work that we do.
Daniel, I love this point because the biggest issue with mental health is the loneliness, right? You do not understand what I'm going through.
Yeah.
So when we talk about mental health, the number one thing is about loneliness. You do not understand what I'm going through, right? When we see on Instagram, there's so many posts saying that the 5 things I wish you knew about people going through anxiety, 5 things I wish you knew about people going through depression, 5 things I wish you knew about people having panic attacks, right? What is it that they're saying? They're saying that, guys, please, I am lonely. I need community support. I need you all to understand me at this point of time, right? And I think it is so important to understand this aspect of community. Without community, there is no way that, or there is a way, but it is way more difficult
Yeah.
to, heal from this.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are two aspects to that, right? One is a community of people who, it could be a family of friends who are not going through what you are going through, right? So, for example, for you to understand what me as a person who has bipolar disorder goes through is impossible.
Completely.
I would never expect you to imagine that, right? But on one level,
I can't empathize,
yeah,
can't do any of that. Sympathize, maybe understand, God
yeah,
knows, right?
yeah,
It's just,
and that's that. I think that we kind of know it's not possible. And there's a few like basic things, which is what you kind of see on social media, which is this is what you need to know. Here are some things that you should not say. All of that is really important. It's a very, very important part of being in a community. Now, the other side is when you suddenly come into a community where, if tomorrow, and I've had this myself, I've had severe depression, I have not been able to get out of bed to go and have a shower, right? For a type A personality like me, that is the most horrible thing on the planet. Now, suddenly I'm in a community where if I say that to someone, they know what I'm talking because they've gone through that themselves, right? So the connection is immediate. It's like it's suddenly cut down a million barriers, and I can have a much more meaningful conversation with that person where, I kind of, okay, you're anxious, I know what that means, right? It's not just a lip service that I'm doing to you. So there are two aspects to it. One is the general community, which is very important to develop and hone. And then there's this other, which is, people like us who are on the journey. And what I think an important distinction is that what we have tried to do is stay away from labels, and I don't mind saying this as well, is I think that labels, diagnosis, very important when it's done well, when it's useful to the person, when you get the right help, when you get the right meds, all of that. And at the same time, it's foundational. It is almost like the foundations are set with that. And then how do you build the bricks? How do you build the mortar? How do you build the walls of the house and the roof? That is the stuff that we have to put in ourselves. And a lot of time we focus on the foundation. And because, like I said, the stats in the country are really bad, the foundational aspects are really, really bad. If you go to the number of times I've heard people who say, I've had bad experiences with psychiatrists and therapists, like I hear that every single day, right? And I can't blame the system because the system is broken in some ways. So how do you work on the foundation and on the house and the roof at the same time is really important. So we have no entry barrier to our community, which says only if you have a diagnosis, then come in. We know that a lot of people struggle with lots of different stuff, and everyone is welcome, right? If you're in distress, you're welcome because we are a community where there's lots of distress. Come, let's celebrate it because, once you get past it and once you're able to release that distress, there's a lot of innovation, creativity, and wisdom, which I really feel passionately about.
Daniel, I love this. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. Daniel, how can people get in touch with you and, be part of the community, be part of what you're doing, support what you're doing?
Sure. So there are a couple of ways for people to enter into our community. One is we're doing sort of holistic workshops, and the first one actually starting this Saturday. So we're doing something on nature therapy, which is we're not going out into nature, but if you're sitting right now at your desk, how is it that you can connect with nature, right? And then we have multiple things, like including mental health and the gut. How do you deal with this inner critic? So we have these kind of 90-minute workshops that we do once or twice every month that people can try out. The best way to do it is go to our website, and it's called BecauseYOU.in. And we can probably put it on the podcast link, I'm assuming. And people can kind of sign up for these workshops. They can try it out, see how it is, and then experience what we do. The second way of doing it is we have a little bit more of an intensive program where we do kind of 5 sessions. It's a smaller group of people. It's kind of a cohort-based learning where across 5 weeks, for 90 minutes each session, we delve into one topic really deeply. And that's a little bit more about, creating space for yourself, understanding yourself, learning some of these tools that I've sort of talked about today, but then really like getting the sense of community, because that's where you get, there are 10 people, you start to get to know each other really well, and you start to open up and, look at mental health in a different way. So those are 2 ways to get in. The best way is through our website, BecauseYOU.in.
BecauseYOU.in. Superb. Daniel, thank you so much for coming on the Habit Coach podcast.
It's a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me here.
Superb.
If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to reach out to me, I am Ashdin Doc on Twitter and Instagram. You can find lots more information on my website, awesome180.com, or check out different content on my YouTube channel called AWESOME180. That's Awesome 180.
From uncensored and unfiltered chats with the who's who of the entertainment industry, I, Siddharth Kannan, bring you a very hardcore chat show called Candid Kannan. Tune in every Friday on the IVM Podcast app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Whether you're an established sports person or a budding one, or simply a sports enthusiast, join us, Tanvi and Shlok.
We are 2 passionate pro badminton players talking policy, mindset and everything sport.
So tune in to The Millennial Athlete every Monday.
Only on the IVM Podcast Network.
Trust us, it's gonna be lit.